Jó reggelt kívánok mindenkinek.
Good morning.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Jó reggelt kívánok, hölgyeim és
Warm
uraim.
welcome to the Automotive
Sok
Conference
szeretettel
of HIPA
üdvözlöm
in
Önöket a
2021.
2021-es
First of all,
autóipari
it is my
konferenciáján.
great pleasure and honor
Először is
to
nagy
welcome everyone.
megtiszteltetés
My name is
számomra,
Robert
hogy
Ésik and
üdvözölhetem
I
Önöket.
work as
Ésik
the
Robertnek
Chief Executive
hívnak,
Officer of
és
HIPA, the Hungarian
HIPA
Investment Promotion Agency.
vezérigazgatójaként
I'm pleased to
dolgozom,
welcome
ez
here everyone
nemzeti
at the venue today,
befektetési
but
ügynökség.
also
Nagy
I'm
szeretettel
pleased to
üdvözlöm
welcome
Önöket
those
a
colleagues who are following
mai
us online. Thank you very much for
helyszínén,
accepting
illetve
our
köszöntöm azokat
invitation.
is, akik
We are still living in
az
times
online
where we
térben
have to
követnek bennünket.
organize
Sajnos
hybrid
még
events, but
mindig azt a
it's
korszakot
definitely a
éljük,
pleasure to be
amikor
able to
hibrid
host
rendezvényeket
a
kell
certain
tartanunk,
number
de
of you
mindig
already
öröm az,
in person.
hogyha sokakat személyesen is
It is
viszont
the
láthatunk.
seventh occasion that we
Ez a
organize
hetedik
this
alkalom,
conference.
hogy megrendezzük a járműipari
And as you know,
konferenciánkat, és amint
HIPA is an
tudják,
economic development
a
organization.
HIPA egy
We are
gazdaságfejlesztési
focused on
szervezet,
investment promotion,
a beruházás
and for us, the
ösztönzés
automotive industry
a fő
definitely
tevékenységünk,
plays
és
a key
számunkra
role.
az autóipar, a járműipar
So this
kulcsfontosságú
event
szerepet
is
tölt
one of the
tölt
very
be.
few events that
Éppen
we
ezért ez
organize
az
with a sectorial focus.
esemény egy
In
olyan,
fact, we only have
az
two of
azon ritka
those.
események közé tartozik,
But we
amit
can say that
szektorális
this event has now
fókusszal
become a
szervezünk
tradition,
meg, és most
which
már
we
azt
are
mondhatjuk,
proud
hogy
to
ez a
be able to continue
rendezvény hagyománnyá
after a
vált,
short
és örülünk
interruption
annak, és
in the
büszkék
last year.
vagyunk arra, hogy a tavalyi
This event
kihagyás
is
után újra
important to us
folytathatjuk ezt
because,
a tradíciót.
as I have already
Ez a
mentioned,
rendezvény
the
nagyon
automotive
fontos
industry is one
számunkra,
of
hiszen, amint
the flagship
említettem, a
industries
járműipar,
of the national
a
economy.
magyar nemzetgazdaság
You
egy
will hear more about that in the upcoming video message of Minister Péter Szijjártó. Nevertheless, from an investment promotion point of view, I would also like to point out a few issues. First of all, this sector has been a key contributor when it comes to foreign direct investment volumes and job creation. It has always been among the top 3 sectors in the last 7 years, since we have been gathering on an annual basis. I am now proud to be able to welcome the representatives of 8 OEM companies, 5 of which are or will be active in manufacturing, and 3 others which are active in business services, engineering, or purchasing. We also have representatives of 66 Tier 1 companies in the country, and we also have a community of more than 700 automotive suppliers with manufacturing presence. So the ecosystem is really wide-ranging and has been successfully growing in the recent past. I am, of course, very proud to be able to welcome 3 premium German OEMs in the country, which makes us the only country in Europe outside of Germany to be able to say such welcome messages. More recently, we have been very active in the area of electric mobility, which we consider as one of the strategic trends of the industry. And since we want to make sure that the automotive industry remains competitive in Hungary on the long term, we have been trying to attract investment in this area. You will see from the presentation of Mr. András Kadocsa as well that we have done so far so good, because we can proudly say that we are either number 1 or number 2 in Europe when it comes to the output of electric vehicle batteries. In fact, the annual capacity in this year will reach already 50 gigawatt hours in the country. And by 2025, based on the decision which have already been announced, we will reach 150 gigawatt hours of output. So clearly, Hungary is among the leaders. And last but not least, we have also been able to witness the growth of investments in engineering and innovation. We have recently celebrated the anniversary of development activities of Audi Hungary, for example, but other companies have also been quite active in this domain. So this is the number 1 reason, the importance and the leverage of the sector on the national economy. Secondly, we all know that this industry is currently undergoing major transformation, and as you will also hear about it, is facing major disruptions in different areas, including regulatory environment, including technology and customer behavior. So for us, it's important to understand these global challenges and also important to follow the local responses to these global challenges. And that, I think, gives another important reason for us to gather. And last but not least, we do consider that the automotive industry is probably the sector which represents most opportunities to Hungarian suppliers, Hungarian mid-sized companies who have the ambition and who have the ability to enter international value chains of the industry. And we have been continuously working on helping Hungarian suppliers to get access to these value chains, to remain in these value chains, and potentially progress in these value chains. Today, we will also show you one aspect of supplier development, as this year we have decided to launch an event that we have called the Innovation Bootcamp. You will hear more about that during the program. So what is planned on the agenda? After the video message of Minister Szijjártó, you will hear an industry overview from Mr. Kadocsa from McKinsey & Company. This will be followed by one of the highlights of the program, our CEO roundtable discussion. And we will try to address, on the one hand side, the latest results and achievements, but also these global disruptions which are coming up and their implications on the Hungarian ecosystem. And as far as supplier development is concerned, we will be able to host the closing event of our 3-day program that we have co-organized with Design Terminal. So I'm really happy that we will have on stage 9 innovative Hungarian companies who will be able to pitch and explain their solutions to you. And I think this is the perfect audience for that. So with that, I would like to thank you once again for accepting our invitation. I hope that you will enjoy the program. And I would now kindly ask for your attention to have a look together at the video message of Minister Szijjártó. Thank you once again.
Jó napot kívánok, tisztelettel köszöntöm Önöket. Higgyék el, nagyon sajnálom, hogy nem tudok most ott lenni Önökkel, de az OECD Párizsban most tartja a miniszteri értekezletét, ahol a Magyarország és a járműipar szempontjából is rendkívül fontos kérdések vannak napirenden, hogy más nem mondjak, a globális minimumadó kérdésében nagy küzdelem várható, de ugyanígy a környezetvédelmi és versenyképességi kérdések egymással harmóniába hozása is fontos téma lesz, ezért kérem nézzék el nekem, hogy most csak így egy videó kapcsolaton keresztül tudom köszönteni Önöket. Egyúttal szeretném kihasználni az alkalmat, hogy a nagyrabecsülésemet és a köszönetemet is kifejezzem Önöknek tekintettel arra, hogy az autóipar, az autóipari vállalatok rendkívüli hozzáadott értéket képviselnek a magyar gazdaság működésében és rendkívül gyors újraindulásában. Szerintem egyáltalán nem túlzás azt mondani, hogy az elmúlt évtized a magyar autóipar nagy évtizede volt, hiszen ha 2010 és 19-es évet összehasonlítjuk egymással, akkor azt látjuk, hogy 3600 milliárd forintról 9500 milliárd forintra nőtt az ágazat termelési értéke, 81 ezerről 180 ezerre nőtt a munkavállalók létszáma az ágazatban, aztán persze jött 2020 a világgazdaság és a világkereskedelem fekete éve, de én azt hiszem, hogy amit lehetett mind a kormány, mind az autóipar képviselői megtettek annak érdekében, hogy a lehető legkisebb károkkal megússzuk ezt az esztendőt. Köszönöm azoknak a vállalatoknak, amelyek részt vettek a versenyképesség növelésére vonatkozó támogatási programban. Köszönöm azoknak, akik nem bocsátották el a munkavállalóikat. Köszönöm azoknak, akik még a nehéz időszakban is beruházásokat hajtottak végre. És most itt vagyunk 2021-ben, és hogyha minden jól megy, akkor talán egy óriási rekorddal fejezhetjük be ezt az évet. Soha nem fordult még elő az, hogy a magyar autóipar termelési értéke egyetlen esztendő leforgása alatt eléri a 10 000 milliárd forintot. Most van erre esély. 7 hónap után egy 25%-os növekedést tudott felmutatni az ágazat, 5900 milliárd forintnyi termelési értékkel, tehát reménykedünk benne, hogy
production value of 5,900 billion forints. So we believe that the remaining time of the year will be enough to make up for it, to reach the 10,000 billion forints. While we are only 95th in terms of inhabitants and population, we are now placed 20 in terms of automotive industrial exports. Actually, in engines, in terms of engine, we are third and sixth in terms of gasoline and diesel engines, and we are already on place 5th in terms of electric batteries. I think this is going to be key. We have already done a lot in order to ensure that our traditional automotive industrial capacities are not lost, and we have done a lot in order to ensure the shift towards the new economic era. This year we were able to announce Hungary's largest greenfield investment by SK Innovation in Ivan. So we can see that the automotive industry is going towards this revolutionary direction, and we are doing everything in our powers to make sure that our political decision-making does not put automotive industrial companies into a technologically unacceptable position. We want to ensure that we can go balanced in terms of both environmental protection and competitiveness. I would like to once again thank you for your loyalty towards Hungary and the Hungarian economy. Thank you for the investments with which Hungary has reached a position that is highly regarded throughout Europe in terms of the quick recovery. I wish for all of us that the coming months will no longer be about lack of chips and disruptions in the supply chains, but about continuously increasing production. This is in our interest, and we will continue to do everything in our powers to make sure that the Hungarian automotive industry remains a flagship of the European automotive industry. Thank you. I wish you great discussions today.
Thank you very much for your attention, ladies and gentlemen. And now we are moving on with the program, and it is my pleasure to be able to invite on the stage Mr. András Kadocsa, who is Head of Automotive and Advanced Industries in Central Europe and also a partner at McKinsey & Company. He will give us a presentation about the future of mobility. So, András, the stage is yours.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome also from my side. The automotive industry has clearly transformed the society and the world over the past over 100 years. If we looked at the Rue Rivoli in Paris, which is an emblematic street, and I hope we will see it also on the presentation in a second. So if you look at this emblematic street in Paris, and we believe in this transformative power of automotive, if we stop in the 70s, we could have thought that this journey is accomplished. Because by then, a road that was in the early century full of horses and carriages and people walking around was turned into a 6-lane, one-way highway, basically, in the middle of the city. So one could have celebrated a journey accomplished of automotive transforming society and the world as we know. If you look at the same street in 2020, this is a bike and pedestrian only street with no cars whatsoever, not even parking ones. So one could think once more that this journey is accomplished in a different manner. So the changing mobility scene again left a very visible mark on an emblematic part of or known physical reality. But given these fluctuations in the story, it's almost impossible to predict how 2030 and beyond will look like, how Rue Rivoli, for example, will look like in the next decades. So this is a constantly changing, fluid story. We give an attempt today in this presentation to show some of the trends that we think will shape the automotive world, and through that also shape our society and the known world around us. So 3 major disruptions we categorize currently. First one is regulation, which has a very strong influence mainly on the acceptance and proliferation of electromobility, but it also has a very major influence on the mobility modes, i.e. what society prefers, mainly in the major cities, but also overall in terms of transportation. An emblematic number that is relatively recent is the 55% reduction ambition of CO2 announced by the EU in the summer, which is a shockingly high number even compared to ambitious targets from the past years. And the automotive industry and mobility in general will inevitably be a poster child of this, even if we all know that it is not necessarily the key driver of these emissions, but is always a very popular target in social and public discussions on who should really contribute to this. So automotive is definitely will feel the impact of these very ambitious plans. In terms of the consumer acceptance, we speculated a lot around this over the past years. We all knew already 5 years ago, and even a bit before, many predicted electric vehicles will take over. Micromobility has been emerging for a while, but it was uncertain how much the true acceptance is. Even 2-3 years ago, major debates on whether the society will ever fully accept the limitations that EVs will still pose over the next years. You see here an 80% quote on a year-on-year increase between 2020 and 2021, assuming we keep the current pace for this year. And we also see another number for the micromobility and micromobility, which is also booming over the past years. Both of these are also influenced, of course, by COVID directly or indirectly, either by people's willingness and wish to travel in more privacy, that's the micromobility part, but also in terms of the economic fostering measures many governments introduced, which were almost always, but definitely in many cases, targeted to the electromobility. So these are not numbers that just arose as per the customers decided to accept these things more, but it's still a signal for customers accepting it when there are incentives and other forces in play. Technology is the third thing. It's an enabler, but it's also a driver of the changes. We are today in a world where we have, in many countries, a cost parity of an average electric vehicle if you take into account the significant subsidies that are currently associated to it, and if you calculate a total cost of ownership for the relatively large usage mileage. So it is, again, with subsidies, but it's still a signal that today it's not an abstract reality. If someone buys an EV, it's in many countries not necessarily an economic chic, but it's something where it's almost being a frugal consumer. If you drive enough, this will be very lucrative to buy one. We have seen an 8-fold increase in the investments into the autonomous vehicles over the past 5 years. And this is a very interesting and hot scenery, because 5 years ago we already predicted it will come, it's on the corner, and it still hasn't really arrived, so no one knows when it will really arrive, but definitely more and more money is pumped into this one. And all this transforms the car, connectivity added on top as a layer. Altogether, the car will change as a product, and the automotive industry is currently sometimes appears to a little bit struggle with this change, because we have seen 6 months plus delays in some of the introductions of electric vehicles because of, or new vehicles, but mostly the electric ones, because of the software-related issues. Not semicon shortages, software issues for the introduction itself and not for the manufacturing part. So let's deep dive a bit into the three areas. In terms of the regulation, what is the strongest driver of electromobility introduction is simply the ban of ICE, so internal combustion engine vehicles. And here you see on the right side a list of countries that already announced to ban ICEs, and you see the related dates. If everything goes as announced, even by 2040, roughly half of current sales volumes, and so the markets corresponding to half of the current sales volumes will have banned internal combustion engines going to the market as new vehicles. Even emblematic countries such as Germany and Japan have made some indications for a little bit later date, which almost feels like science fiction, but it's still a signal that even these countries commit or try to commit to something. The Nordics is no surprise for most of us, and California, which has always been on the forefront on this, contrary to the rest of the United States. But what is interesting and surprising is India in the second bucket with 2030. Many in the public opinion think that this is a wishful thinking and is hard to see a way that would bring us to this, given the current mix of vehicles in India. But it's still very interesting, I think, as a signal, even if it will not happen necessarily in 2030, that there is an ambition even in India to try to clean out their cities from IC engine vehicles. So if you have more EVs, you will need more charging points. Here you see the blue line is the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Directive of the EU, proposing 1 charger for every 10 cars. So that's 0.1 charger per car. That's what the chart itself shows here. And you see that currently there are only 4 major countries that match this or surpass it: the Netherlands, China, France, and Italy. Many are below, but what is more interesting than this, I think, because it's relatively easy to reach this at current vehicle numbers, what is more interesting that the vehicle sales are booming. So it will be very, very hard for the infrastructure to keep up with an absolutely booming electric vehicle sales, and it's a cumulative number. So 10 years from now, most of the cars that were sold last year will still be on the road, especially EVs seem to age relatively slowly. So it will be a very tough game to build all this infrastructure. Hungary stands relatively well on this one, in my view. We have about 1,500 charging points currently for 30,000 green license plate vehicles, many of them being plug-in hybrid vehicles, which in my opinion less of a general use case for the public infrastructure charging. They will, yes, of course, sometimes use it, but the main point is how the pure battery electric vehicles can do this, this charging exercise. So we made a little thought exercise here on how cities can influence their mobility mix. So away from electric vehicle now to the other aspect of regulation, which mostly influences the mobility modes. And you see how the private vehicle share can decrease if you start shifting along the x-axis on this chart, which is increasing severity or strictness of policies, reducing or restricting the car entries. So as you move from left to right, you have a natural relationship of having less and less private vehicles. Of course, if you fully ban the city, then it's going to be 0 private vehicles. That's the end of the scale here. But what we did here in our model is that we looked at how previously made policy changes influence the penetration of private vehicle as mode of transportation, and extrapolated it for some selected cities. So if you see, Paris has currently a bit above 50% private vehicle share in the mobility mix. If it introduces things that they either announced or we think they could announce based on the past trajectory, they would get down to Beijing levels today in terms of the private vehicle mode of share. Or the same goes for London, which is already at the Paris levels and would go down significantly if they further increase the congestion charge and area-specific car bans. London is, by the way, an emblematic city for this because they were one of the first to introduce it at scale, and you can see what the true impact was on the right side of this chart, which means 25% decrease in the vehicle kilometers by passenger cars in the central London charging zone, and it is also a trend, a very clear trend of continuous decrease over the past years. So it's a very powerful measure to simply direct people to public transport and other modes. One other very interesting thing we found here, just as a spectacular example, is Paris. You see it in the lower left, in the bottom of the chart. They announced the reduction of the surface parking spaces from 140,000 to 70,000, so half it over the next years, or God knows actually how much time, but that's again a nice ambition. That would mean we see half the cars parked on the street compared to today. So if we go back to the Rue Rivoli example, also the broader neighborhood, if you walk the streets, there's going to be half the cars parked on the street. It's a dramatic influence of our perception of our built environment. Very interesting move I found. If you go to the next chapter, that's the consumer acceptance. Here's an outcome of a survey that was done in 7 industrial countries, US, Brazil, Germany, France, and so on. And you see some selected answers which we found quite interesting and predictive. It's less than half of the people who currently prefer private car as a main mode of transformation. Likely this is not driven by the US answers, but nevertheless it's very interesting that it's below half. 55% of people would trade in their car if there was a better autonomous service available. I think autonomous will be a true breakthrough. It's a pity we don't know when it really happens in a form that we dream of. Micromobility is, maybe it's also a bit COVID-driven, this response, but micromobility is booming as a true alternative. And when it comes to shared mobility, interestingly, many associate it with the cost efficiency or the frugality of the consumer, but it's often a convenience choice. And I can also confirm that, sometimes I personally prefer some of these hailing services because I just simply have a better control of what's going on in my travels. So it's very interestingly convenience driven. If we go one further, this is 6 archetype areas that we see for urban transportation mixes. The first 2 are North America and Western Europe, where you see that we predict in a decade that the red part is new modes, we call it. It's robo-shuttles, robo-taxis, so basically autonomous vehicle type of modes. And the orange one, which is taxi and e-hailing, but it's mostly the e-hailing. So we predict in these first 2 columns that these 2 modes will significantly push down the use of private vehicle as a main mode of transport in these cities. These are the first 2 groups of columns. If you go to the right, that is the northern that is the South Asia and the South American part. Here we see also a decrease in the private vehicle usage, but this is mainly driven by a further growth of an already very strong public transport participation. So both rail and bus will further push down the use of private vehicles. Especially interesting, I found the Indian metropolises, as we show here. I was even puzzled for a moment how come the private usage is so much going down despite the low penetration of cars currently in the market. And I just realized the bubble on top of the right column in that South Asia part, it says 145% of vehicle kilometers traveled in 10 years. So up 45%, which means we see the entry of entire societal layers into the mobility space. And of course, people who couldn't even afford a bus before and now will afford to travel, they will start with the bus and the train. It's not that they would suddenly buy a car. So it's very interesting how simply the expansion of the cake changes the proportions in the Indian area. The middle two parts is Northern and Eastern Asian, so Chinese and Japanese, Korean territories, where we see basically a mix of these 2 realities. So we also foresee a significant expansion of the robotaxi, autonomous vehicle-related modes and e-hailing, but we also see a further expansion of the public transport, which is already today more significant than in the Western European or North American space. So it is interesting how this will totally transform the picture of the cities in a few years, but it also has a significant impact on the private vehicle ownership, which is, of course, for us in the automotive industry, is a very interesting aspect to foresee and consider. So, a bit about technology. Here you see how many vehicles were announced in the recent years for the years to come that are battery vehicles, battery electric vehicles. We showed the same chart a few years ago celebrating that there are 20 plus, I think that's what we said back then, 20 plus vehicles already announced. We have to say that there are already 230 different types of battery electric vehicles on the market that have been introduced in the past years, and you see that there's a lot coming. These are these different layers of the colored chart. It is a downward trend just because the further we look out into the future, we don't know what's going to be introduced. So we made an attempt to foresee it, and it's definitely plateau over 100 vehicles. In 2022, there are 129 announcements on non-battery electric vehicles currently. So the total announcements in 2022 is around 230 models. So we think it's reasonable to assume as soon as ICEs phase out, the total will also plateau somewhere north of 140 pieces. How will the share look like? This is the global, this is our prediction for the global automotive passenger vehicle market for the years to come. This is what we call the expected mobility scenario. So we have a delayed and an accelerated, and the expected is the most probable in our view. So that's the most probable scenario. Here you see 39% battery electric vehicles globally, 1% fuel cell, 37% of different forms of hybrids, including plug-in hybrid, and only 23% on the ICEs. If we recall, 2030 is the year by which we will have already a series of countries introducing bans on ICEs. So seeing the 23% is no wonder, although part of the hybrids will be also concerned by this. If you look at the same for Europe, it's an even stronger change, and we anticipate a tilt to above half of the market becoming battery electric vehicles, still 1% fuel cell and 42% for hybrid, and only 6% for ICEs. The 42% hybrids includes only a 5% share of plug-in hybrids, 5 percentage point share. So if you add up the first two, 51 plus 1 plus the 5%, that's 57% of cars that are able to run without an ICE engine for a while. So it may be surprising that the PHEVs, so the plug-in hybrids, are so low in share. They are actually 10% in a 2025 prediction, so they are going down in share by 2030, simply because it's a very expensive technology, obviously, to combine having both large batteries as well as a clean and elaborate internal combustion engine system in the car. So that's more a transitory technology. So here another chart of which we have seen hundreds forms and shapes, and it's a very interesting debate with a lot of considerations. So take it as a directional thinking only. We say currently that the TCO, so the total cost of ownership parity, can be reached at around $100 per kilowatt hour battery prices. We are not far away from this, by the way, so this may very soon come. This will be, although, a bit lower for China, simply because of the mix of the market, so small and cheaper cars, and there's a different parity, and even a bit lower in the US simply because of the fuel prices. By the way, fuel prices currently obviously help this trend big time because of the historic rises. So we say currently $100 per kilowatt hour with a few assumptions on relatively high mileage per vehicle for this one. A more concrete example, very recent, last month data about two selected cars that are very comparable by their use and even prestige on the market in general. You see that if you take the currently available subsidies in the example country, Germany, into account, then the pure electric version is significantly and perceivably cheaper to buy than the same performance ICE engine, pure ICE engine car. One could argue and debate a lot about this. I myself could also take our own chart into pieces and doubt some of the paths, but in general, it is still a fact of life that it's definitely not a luxurious spending today to walk into a dealership and buy a pure electric vehicle in this country. I mentioned we made different scenarios. I brought only one slide on the accelerated scenario because it's half science fiction, I would say, so that's a very aggressive assumption on how mobility will change. But let me show this one single slide on it with a very given purpose. So in this case, this is the European space now, we would have 75% of EVs. So we remember we had this like 57% if we add up everything in the normal case. This is 75%, so very aggressive. Given also the way up to this 75% is steeper, year, 1 out of 4 cars on the street would be electric vehicles by 2030. Just let's play with this fantasy for a moment. What would it mean for our world if this happens to happen? That would mean 24 battery gigafactories necessary, 24. These are significant investments in any size of country, and we would need 24 of that. This would also mean, interestingly enough, 80% more higher pollution from the automotive industry, unless many other things change, which is a consideration that sometimes is brought into discussion, but it's still, I found it quite surprising to see the hard number of 80% more pollution. And what is even more interesting, I think, if we want to keep up pace on the infrastructure with this expansion, that would mean 15,000 chargers installed per week in Europe, per week. So even if you split it up to all the countries in play, that's a very significant number. And in the end, these cars would take 5% of the additional electricity of the European network, which may look a small number, but it's given it's a marginal amount, it's not all that obvious how you cover it at the green version or in green versions. This will also have a significant impact on the components and therefore the tier 1 industry, the tier 1 part of automotive, which, for example, in Hungary plays also an extremely important role. So we divided the world into 3 types of components, as you see here. And the left side is 2019, the last undisrupted pre-COVID year, and the next one is, the right side is the prediction for 2030. So we have these 3 commodity types. We have growing ones, stable ones, and sunset ones. Obviously, sunset ones are related mainly to the ICE engine, so the engine, the transmission, different engine systems that will slump from 22% to 10% in their share of the total market. These are global figures here. And the growing ones will explode from 18% to 46% of something that itself is quite exploding because it grows from $1.1 trillion to over $1.5 trillion. So it's a growing cake of which the new technologies related to EVs and autonomous drive will take an increasing share at the expense of traditional ones. If we show the same chart for Europe, all we need to see is that it's an even more pronounced phenomenon. So we have here 50% and the sunset ones go down to 8%. It's simply a mixed effect of the European market. How will this change the landscape? This is zoom into the powertrain components market. You see the composition on the left side, again in the last undisrupted year, 2019, where transmission and engine components, drive shaft take the largest part of the pie in value. And this is fully replaced by 2030 by battery packs, drive shaft still remaining, e-motors, inverters, and other things. And you see that new entrants are coming to play, companies that we in the automotive world only known from our private life of entertainment devices and communication infrastructure, and they are in play big time, obviously, as suppliers now. And many of the incumbent tier ones are trying to reshape their offering and refocus their activities to match this changing reality. If we double click to the batteries, it's a very spectacular chart. What is the needed capacity on cell production in Europe in the decade ahead of us? We predict an 18-fold increase of the necessary capacities. No wonder we have all these dramatic announcements on large factories across Europe. And we see that the announced capacities already almost cover this 2030 need. If we take less likely, that's the dotted line, less likely announcements, it even surpasses. So we may theoretically even find ourselves in a place where the supply is significantly higher than the demand. If we take all the announcements higher and lower likelihood, you see on the right side a very balanced share of the different types of players. You see incumbents, which are the pure battery players. You see JVs between these players and the OEMs. You see startups that try to make a rocketing career on the back of this movement. And you see the integrators, where Tesla is obviously the most notable one. If we look at how Europe is predicted to look like by 2030, as HIPA CEO Mr. Esik just mentioned, we are number 2 roughly on the market in predictions after Germany. It's an absolutely it's incredible pride to look at this slide, being a Hungarian. Who would have thought even a few years ago that in this we are number 2 in a continent full of automotive traditions. And what marks the speed of change in this is a number on the lower right, which says 77 gigawatts hour capacity we predicted for 2030 based on the announcements that have been already made. We updated it yesterday, but Mr. Esik already reported well above 100 a few minutes ago. So I expect this to go even further actually by the time we reach 2030. This is an absolutely incredible place to be in, and I think it will secure the relevance of Hungary in the automotive landscape for decades to come. If we refocus again for a moment for the other big trends, the autonomous drive, the autonomous vehicles, we made here also 3 different scenarios: high, medium, and low disruptions. Obviously, medium being in the middle, the light blue being the most probable. And maybe the only interesting thing to take away here is that this kind of charts we have shown for many years by now, and we are always behind with reality. So this autonomous drive is coming, it is amazing, it will truly transform the whole world, but it's coming a bit slower than we expected. Currently, our best guess is seen on the right side, which is 6% on the full L3 and only 2% on the L4 capabilities by 2030. At the same time, we also see the first L3 light vehicles coming to the market, the Honda TJP in the Legend in a limited number next year, and the Mercedes's Drive Pilot in the S-Class and the EQS also next year. So we are progressing, but it's a bit slower move than we anticipated earlier. The car will change big time in terms of the electronics and software architecture. Currently, especially earlier, we have seen a car with a lot of subsystems that don't communicate with each other and have their own control units, their own language, and their own reality. And this will gradually transition towards something that resembles more on the tech world, the technology world's architectures, with a lot of layers that are abstract from the vehicle. And this is a step toward the disaggregation of the hardware from the software. So it may sound like not so interesting if you look into if you sit into the car, but this may be the reason why in a few years from now the car and the software will live partially a bit separated life, just like our phones, which may have an Android system irrespective of what brand of phone we are using. This will boom the software and electronics market. You see a 5% annual increase for the next decade to come. No surprise of the power electronics, 21% because of the electric vehicles booming. What is to note is the 9% yearly increase on the software itself. And companies have to keep up with building capabilities in integrating and designing software to avoid the 6 months delays that we have seen on the market, introducing very prestigious emblematic models and still being in a delay. One note on the semiconductor market, which has been in discussions heavily lately because of the shortage. Bad news that the shortage will stay for a while, and even worse news that we will need much more semiconductors. So the automotive industry is doing right when currently reshaping their partnership with the chip makers from something that was a pretty transactional to more strategic. Otherwise, we will not be able to cover the humongously increasing needs. And almost lastly, here a slide on how the car as a product may change. One example is, I think it's a Volvo on the upper right corner. It's just a design study on how a fully autonomous vehicle interior may look like, how we try to engage our customer in the car as an automaker, and if we manage to do so, then we have this dotted line. We can take more of the share of wallet of their attention and therefore also economic benefits. If we don't manage to, which is another example here, then we will just lose out on this opportunity. This is a startup company called Canoe, which designed a car with only a screen inside which you can connect your phone to, so they don't even try to occupy the consumer. They give a chance to put your iPhones or Androids on it. That's a very different philosophy, but these guys guys at Kanu have nothing to lose because they are not incumbents and they try to be disruptive in any way they are able to. And lastly, one slide on how we predict the passenger vehicle sales for the next years. I think many of us would have underwritten the recovery that we currently see in the middle of the crisis. So it was painful, but it is rebounding relatively quickly. And here you see 3 scenarios. One in the middle is the most probable. It's again the 3 mobility scenarios that we see. If mobility gets delayed, we will have more cars on the road. So the red one is a pessimistic scenario for the mobility scenery, which is an optimistic scenario for our vehicle sales. If the mobility accelerates dramatically, that is an optimistic scenario for the mobility space, but pessimistic for the OEMs, then we may even see a starting decrease of the overall sales. But in order that to be true, you would need to believe that 5 million vehicles per year disappear from the offerings because of regulations, because of these dramatic measures in large cities, for example, or CO2 penalties and so on. And another 2 million would disappear because of consumer behavior, and another 2 million for at-scale introduction of autonomous vehicles, which I personally think is relatively unlikely by that time as we see now. So maybe we can take away the middle line and celebrate the rebound of the automotive industry, which will also mean a prosperous decade ahead of us in Hungary for the automotive sector. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, András, for your presentation. I think it was really interesting to see these major trends which are shaping the future of mobility. And now it's time to hear from the OEMs of Hungary. How do they respond locally to these global challenges? So may I please invite the participants of the CEO Roundtable to join me on stage. Until I have the pleasure to greet the participants from our players, please, Mr. Dintner, please come on stage. Johan, Robert, Christian, Lukáš, Olivia, thank you all for joining me. I would just like to highlight that we will have this conversation in English and German, so those of you that need interpretation, please use the devices on the tables. Well, first of all, thank you very much for all of you for accepting the invitation. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be here with you on stage. And I'm sure that the audience is very much looking forward to your comment. Maybe let's start with a quick introduction. I have the pleasure to welcome Olivia Mesic on stage. Olivia is heading Opel Szentgotthárd. And then, as far as the gentlemen are concerned, we will go in alphabetical order, considering your company name. So, Mr. Alfons Dintner is chairman of the board of Audi Hungária ZRT. Then I have the honor to have Mr. Johan Lorenzen. Johan is the head of the Debrecen BMW plant project. We are also the pleasure to welcome Lukáš Štepek, who is heading the vehicle engineering unit of Jaguar Land Rover here in Budapest. Then we have Mr. Robert Christian from Magyar Suzuki. So we start with an M because of Magyar Suzuki, that's why they are sitting in this alphabetical order. And he is the executive general manager from Magyar Suzuki. Thank you very much for being here. We have Mr. Christian Wolf, who is, of course, the CEO of Mercedes-Benz Manufacturing Hungary, and this completes the round of participants. So I would propose to start with a quick warm-up question, because I'm sure that all of you have been facing extraordinary challenges during the past 18 months. So my first warm-up question would be, What achievement are you most proud of in 2021 if you look back on the current calendar year? Let's start with you, Mr. Dinter.
I would like to answer in German. I am from Bavaria, so German is my first foreign language. So the challenges, I am proud that our company is a sound company in every sense of the word. And I think we made it safely through the pandemic. Audi Hungary is a safe company. We have secured our infection chains, and I think we made it safely through the pandemic times. And I think this is a very important achievement, so that we're on the safe side with Audi Hungary. And we were also among the first ones that also organized vaccination stations with the support of the Hungarian government. And we managed to vaccinate our employees, our experts and their families, and also our suppliers that work in our factory. So it worked out perfectly. And like I said, the company is sound and robust, and we're very proud that despite of COVID and the semiconductor situation, we managed to do a great job in the field of our fixed costs, despite the COVID crisis and the semiconductor, and we managed to produce more than before, and this goes for 2020, and I assume that will also be valid for 2021. Of course, there are still some clouds out there, but we are looking forward to further development, and we are very flexible in organizing our work shifts, and it worked very well, adding and taking away shifts. So we're robust, also from the point of view of cash flow. Of course, we need a lot of cash, that's clear. And we always need to undertake the necessary investments, which we do. We're very proud of that. Transformation goes very smoothly, and that has been like that in the past 20 years. Aggregates, and we have about 170,000 cars per year and about 2 million engines. So it's very important to have our own strong position between the aggregates and the other sectors. So we have 500 people, and we currently would like to increase our manufacturing capacities. Beyond manufacturing, we also provide services for the whole Audi company, and we are very proud of our finances, IT, and procurement. And we also keep adding new products under the motto of a synergy and a maximum of synergy. So we would like to be connected within the company.
Vielen Dank. Thank you very much. Johan, can I move on to you and ask about your highlight of 2021 from the perspective of the BMW Group, please?
Thank you, Robert. So from a BMW Group perspective, I think we are very proud of that we could really manage through the corona pandemic without any major issues within our associates. So everybody kept healthy, and I think that's the most important thing to say throughout these years. And also I'm very proud of that we were able, despite all these corona interruptions, to launch 3 electrical vehicles throughout this year. The all-electric X3, the iX, which just had its international market launch 2 weeks ago, and there is the i4 to come later in this year. So although we have obviously as well a lot of problems in our production system due to Corona, but as well to the semiconductor issues, it's quite important that we are able to launch these vehicles and bring them to the markets. As far as my personal achievements are concerned, being responsible for our plant project, which had a little bit of a difficult phase throughout this year, I'm very proud that we are ramping up the project back again, and we restarted it as we speak by redesigning our production concept, and now are heading forward with this project with full steam going into next year.
Thank you, and that's very good to hear, Johan. Thank you. Moving on to you, Lukas, you of course represent different type of activities here in Hungary, engineering and purchasing. What was your highlight of the year so far?
Good morning, jó reggelt kívánok. First of all, thank you very much for having me here in this excellent forum. I think there are a couple of successes that we can definitely be proud of. First of all, as previous speakers mentioned, Corona, the fact that we've managed to keep our office safe, that we went through this period, is definitely a great success of the whole team of Jaguar Land Rover. Also, as a credit to the whole team, is the fact that we've managed to accommodate to the new working style during this difficult period. And despite of that, we have launched a number of vehicles, one of them earlier this year being the Land Rover Defender. This car not only very recently scored the first place in the JD Power Appeal study, it's also very close to our heart because quite significant amount of development actually happened here in Budapest, so this is even more important for us.
Thank you very much, that's great to hear. Moving on to Magyar Suzuki, I recently had the opportunity to visit you in person, also at the occasion of your 30th anniversary. So how did Magyar Suzuki experience this year, and what are you most proud of, Robert?
So first of all, of course, as the colleague said, we are as well very proud that we could go through this pandemic period without having a chain of infection within the companies. Yes, we had isolated cases, but we could take the necessary actions in order to make sure that we don't have a chain of infections. We are proud as well, and I'm personally very proud of the resilience of our most valued assets of the company, our workforce, because they were very flexible adapting to this situation, to the many challenges what we had, and this gives me a very strong confidence that in the future we can take the next challenges as well. Nevertheless, in 2020, Magyar Suzuki started to produce for the EU market only hybrid cars. This was a real challenge for us. It was a technological change, but at the same time, on the market, it was a very big challenge to make accepted by our customers, first of all, our hybrid cars. And in this year, in Hungary as well, we have sold already 100% only hybrid cars. From this point of view, we are a unique brand in Hungary and in all Europe, supplying only hybrid. ICE cars we are not selling anymore in Europe. But the main issue for us was to make people to accept and understand that these new technologies need investments, need additional cost, so cost of the car is increasing. And we have had in this year a very strong hybrid educational campaign in Hungary for the population to make them to understand. And I'm extremely proud that the figures shows that this campaign was very successful. Despite the fact that we are selling only hybrids, we could keep our market leader position in Hungary. September we have 16.70% market share. So maybe this is the most I am proud of.
Thank you very much. We definitely can see a lot of Vitaras on the streets, and I understand also it is exported even to Japan, although it is called Escudo there, but it's manufactured in Hungary. Moving on to Mercedes-Benz, it seems like Mercedes-Benz is pushing ahead despite of the pandemic. Several major investment projects have been started, but what would you highlight from the recent past, Christian, from Kecskemét?
Well, I think the biggest achievement in the last months or even the last 2 years was that we have managed successfully, and we are still managing successfully, to protect the health of our people. I think that's the most important thing, and when I listen to the colleagues, I think that's our biggest achievement in all of our plans, to keep the people healthy, to protect them, and having the possibility to give them vaccinations in our plant. We did not lose anybody because of Corona, no serious infections, and we did not lose or we did not terminate anybody because of the crisis. As a matter of fact, in the last couple of months during the crisis, we hired a couple of hundreds of people for our 2 milestones projects, you have mentioned it. And that's the second biggest achievement, that we are still on time in launching our EQB, so-called EQB. It's an electric, fully electric sport utility vehicle, which we will show pretty soon in the public. It is the first fully electric vehicle made in Hungary, and I think that makes us, all of us, proud. We are on time, despite Corona, despite the small parts which we are missing. So that's an achievement. And the third one is that we are also on time with our second big, how should I say, milestone project with the second stamp plant we are installing in Kecskemét. On time means the equipment will be installed in the next year, beginning of next year, and start of operation will be end of next year. And as all the colleagues said, we are really proud of our people, that they managed with a lot of flexibility the last couple of months. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Christian. Yes, and I can confirm that we are very much looking forward to the first fully electric vehicle to be entering serial production very soon. Olivia, moving on to you, it seems that in St. Gotthard, one thing always remains, which is Opel. There might be different names of the corporation, and the name of the company might have changed from Opel to PSA, and then from PSA to Stellantis, but Opel St. Gotthard is here to stay. What can you tell us about the achievements of this year so far?
So thank you very much for the opportunity. I would like to highlight for 3 items. The first one, what you mentioned, that practically in January we became the part of the 4th biggest automotive group worldwide, so-called Stellantis, as PSA and FCA merged practically. So it means that probably we will have some additional opportunities in the future, but which was very important and concrete, that the expansion of our product portfolio, as it was announced in January 2021, Opel St. Gotthard is adding a new type of engine to our portfolio, to our lineup. So this is a so-called 4-cylinder new generation turbo engine, and practically the production will be started 2023. And with this new product, we will use our maximum capacity on our machining and assembly line. And practically, I would say that this is a good confirmation of the Stellantis that they are evaluating the knowledge and the experience of the Hungarian plant. The second one, which is also important, that despite of these global supply challenges, the different material shortages, I would like to say that we have managed to avoid a long, I would say, shutdown in this year because we were able to adapt and adjust our production or labor forces to the required demand. And I think this is the most important for all of us.
Thank you very much. Now moving on and going a bit more into the details of those global challenges that we have heard about in the previous presentation: regulatory, environment, consumer behavior, and technology. I would like to understand from your side, how do these global challenges impact the local operations? Maybe starting with Audi Hungary, as we all know that you have a very complex presence here in Hungary, from powertrain to full vehicles, and also development in both internal combustion engine and electric powertrain areas. So, Mr. Dintner, can you give us maybe a brief overview about your local response to these global challenges and how will they impact your long-term presence in the country?
So for us, production is at the very first place. So we want to be emission-free in 2020. This could be reached in Győr, in our plant there, at the whole plant. So we could reach CO2 neutrality. So geothermic, photovoltaic, green trains, all these play a very important role in this. And we want to stay emission-free, but we want to also have an outlook towards outside of Hungary. We're talking about biogas and then air capturing. So we have started all these projects. We are also discussing with our suppliers, logistics partners. We have a complex logistics chain, and we are making bigger and bigger. And then we have a product strategy, which is probably well known. So this is a transformation towards e-mobility. So there we are very active. We have 250 e-engine we are about to produce. At present, 20% of our capacity we want to transform to e-capacity, e-mobility. And so now we are about to launch the premium e-engines. So this will be the big vehicle of our concern, of our group. And it will be a modular way of construction, over 50% of the production. So now we are right in the middle of this transformation towards e-mobility. So for us, it is extremely important to be not only to produce e-mobility, but also to be at the development. So at our location, we have the machines for the whole world globally, and we have all the client topics as we are dealing with these. So e-mobility, we are really, really well prepared to face this challenge. And secondly, the clients, their attitude. Well, so we have a different concept, so not necessarily this sharing concept. So normally, generally, you do not want to use Audi for just a few hours, but for several years. So shortly, we will not only sell cars, but we'll have on-demand models. Just imagine if you want to use a car for a few hours, then you just type in what you want, and in ideal cases there is a retailer. Then you have flat rates, but not only one car, but several, and then you can choose the car you want, and then you have the opportunity to have it for a few hours or for 28 days. So Audi on demand. This is our response to a changed attitude from the clients. So we have a clear plan with stronger digitalization, the data that we have. We can very well estimate what is the demand, what cars are demanded. But of course, we want to offer our clients an Audi that they are really satisfied with. And technology, well, I actually already gave a response because it's very closely related related to climate, environment protection. So flexibility is important, e-mobility. We have all these projects going in the group. There is also a topic where will all these e-engines be produced. Now we have to really be careful there, and the operations. So it will play an important role. So Audi Hungary is really well prepared for the future challenges in this next 6-7 years, definitely. So, but even in 15 years, so now we are about to build our strategies for the coming 15 years. Thank you very much for your comments.
The on-demand concept sounds very interesting. It's the first time I heard some details about it. And I think we also need to highlight that the solar power plant, what you have on the roof of your logistics facility, is one of the largest in Europe, 160,000 square meters, if I'm not mistaken. So I think it's a major step also towards carbon neutrality, as you said. Moving on to Magyar Suzuki, as you are also having significant manufacturing operations, and you have already mentioned the introduction of the hybrid models. What is your local response going forward to some of these major industry trends, Robert?
Okay, so of course our local response is correlated with global Suzuki's strategy. Pandemic, I would say, didn't change this strategy. The strategy laid down in our management midterm plan, we are keeping. Basically, our aim continuously is to supply value-packed products at affordable prices for a large mass of people. And that's the key, and that's the reason of our strategy, how we start to implement the new technologies. As you mentioned, in Hungary as well, we started to produce hybrid cars. But based on our understanding for the demand of our customers, first step was introduction of mild hybrid cars last year. Then now we can say that we have in our model portfolio the full scale of hybrid versions, which our customers can choose: mild hybrid, strong hybrid, and plug-in hybrid versions. And of course is under development the EV, electrification and EV technology and EV models, and we estimate by 2025 to start to come out here in Europe as well with EV models, and we expect that by 2030 we will expand our EV range to all our models, and then after 2030 we will see a more higher ratio of EV sales within our portfolio. That's about the model strategy. Of course, in Hungary, step by step, we all implement these technologies. Our aim as Hungarian team is to be these technologies here as soon as possible, and we are working for that. Regarding the factory emissions as well, is laid down Suzuki strategies to have a globally carbon neutrality by 2050. Of course, here in Hungary, we want to be among the first plants to reach this carbon neutrality. We are very happy that we have already Audi in a very good shape regarding this. In Magyar Suzuki as well, we have started. We have established a team who is now working a strategy how we can reach the carbon neutrality of the factory. Of course, first step, we have already implemented, started to see where we can save energy with small investments, but is under feasibility study the implementation of a solar power plant as well in our plan, and of course are coming next steps in order to make sure that we can solve all our energy needs through green energy.
Thank you very much. It's very good to hear that you have clear plans for the future in this direction for Magyar Suzuki. And moving on to Mercedes-Benz, we have spoken about this with Christian already, that we see the competitive position of Kecskemét as very strong in the production network, because customers can choose very soon from fully electric up to AMG powertrains when it comes to the different models. So Can you tell us a bit more about your local response to these global challenges and how you see the future of Kecskemét?
Yeah, let me start first with the overall company, with Mercedes-Benz Car Group. I have to learn the new name, you know. I started with the company when the name was Daimler-Benz AG, and I had several changes in those 33 years with the company. So let me start with the strategy. My boss, Ola Kalenius, just presented the strategy of Mercedes-Benz Car Group recently in the public. And he said he changed the strategy from electric first to electric only. And he wants to reach that already in 2030. For sure, we will be able to offer also combustion engines, cars with combustion engines, later than 2030, because we expect that not every country will have the infrastructure in 2030 for only electric cars. When you saw the map from the colleague from McKinsey, you see also in 2030 you will have a lot of countries where you can still, where you have to sell still the combustion engines. But we are coming up with a lot of new platforms, electric vehicles and battery plants in the nearest future to reach that target in 2030. And we are really happy and proud that in Kecskemét we are one of the icebreaker plants for fully electric vehicles. We got the opportunity to be the manufacturer for one of the first electric vehicles, fully electric vehicles from Mercedes. As we said, pretty soon we will present that to the public. We are on time. And that makes us really proud. And you mentioned it, you need this flexibility. Look, in Kecskemét we are able to produce on one production line, on the same production line, cars with normal combustion engines, plug-in hybrids, AMGs, still my favorite, and fully electric vehicles. And that gives the plant in Kecskemét a brilliant future, because we prove we can build every car which the customer wants from us. So we are flexible and independent from market influences. And therefore I think we have the great influence. And for sure, green cars need to be built in a green factory. Yeah? And Alphonse mentioned it already. We are also CO2 neutral since last year, working on even CO2 free with solar energy. I think that's mandatory for a car producer in this time, in those times, when you produce so-called green cars, that your plant is also a green plant.
Thank you very much, Christian. Thank you. Well, I think e-mobility only is a bold statement, definitely. So speaking about Opel Szent-Gotthard being a manufacturing site producing internal combustion engines, and of course knowing that for every hybrid vehicle you need both internal combustion engine and electric powertrain as well, how do you see the role of Opel Szent-Gotthard in the future, also in the context of the new Stellantis setup? Olivia.
So as we have already discussed, and we could see in the presentation, that the automotive industry is facing a dramatical changes, and we haven't experienced such changes in the last 100 years, shifting the consumer behavior, shifting the technology and the overall business model of sales. For Szent-Gotthard at this current stage, practically what we can see that, as I already mentioned, and we are responding to this situation by the introduction of the new generation of the engines that we producing currently. This is a 3-cylinder turbo engine, and the additional one what I mentioned earlier. So we will start the production of the 4-cylinder absolutely modern engine from 2023. This product will be applied to the mild and plug-in hybrid cars of the Stellantis portfolio, which is currently 14 brands altogether. So this is the current stage, and practically, as we already discussed, The direction is given in the automotive industry and in the world, but who knows what the future brings. I think which is the most important for us to be prepared. So it means that if the market would require any kind of change, any kind of new possibilities regarding the manufacturing components production for e-drives, for example, the chassis components, or any kind of battery production. So Saint-Gothard should be ready to be involved. So it means that from that perspective, we have to focus on our workforce, improve the knowledge of our people, somehow to prepare them for a kind of mindset change, and which is also important to prepare the leaders, because absolutely different leadership method and style and approach will be needed for the future, not for a long-term perspective, but on a daily basis. So I think from one hand, we try to complete the requirement regarding the hybrid applications, and on the other hand, also important to be prepared for any kind of opportunities.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Olivia, for your comment. Now I'm moving back to the BMW Group, and I understand that the current strategy is to offer the power of choice to the consumers when it comes to the selection of vehicles. But already in November 2020, Mr. Oliver Zipse, chairman of the BMW Group, announced that you expect that from the middle of the decade, the demand for fully electric vehicles will increase significantly. Exactly by that time, you will have your new BEV platform ready. So my question would be, are you on track to reach this target? And even more importantly for us here in Hungary, what role can Debrecen play in this strategy in the future?
Yeah, Robert, let me put this a bit into the perspective how we developed through electromobility within BMW. Of course, the very first and pioneering electrical vehicle was the i3, which is on the market already since 2013, which is what we call our first phase in electric mobility. At this time, we are in the second phase, so we are using our vehicle architectures to equip them with every drivetrain the customer wants. Is it a combustion engine, a plug-in hybrid, or even battery electric vehicles? We call it the power of choice because we believe the customer should decide which drivetrain suits him best. And of course, our manufacturing systems is flexible to accompany all these drivetrains so that we can run all these different vehicles through our factories without having special factories for special drivetrains. And that maintains a lot of flexibility, and I think the presentation from the colleague from McKinsey showed that this is very essential in the next years to come. So out of that, it's actually the next logical step now to enter into phase 3, where we then develop our vehicles not from the combustion engine, but for the electrical drivetrain, and maybe with additions to others. But the focus for the Neue Klasse, as we call it, the new class, is to be designed for an electrical vehicle, for an electrical drivetrain. And as you mentioned, we announced that we will introduce this in mid of the decade, so in 2025. And of course, our new plant in Debrecen will play a very important role in this strategy because Debrecen is the first plant in the BMW network to launch this new architecture. So actually, the new Hungarian plant will be the first plant to build the new cars of our new architecture, so which is a quite exciting challenge, but also a quite exciting task to work through. And we are very proud of being picked for the first plant to do this in our production network.
Thank you, and this sounds really exciting. We very much look forward to it.
Absolutely.
Moving on to Jaguar Land Rover. First of all, I have to tell you that Jaguar Land Rover has been very close to our hearts as HIPA, because already since 2014 we have been in touch with you and your management. First, we have been talking about a manufacturing facility, which in the end did not come to Hungary, but we have kept the contact, and in November 2018, you have announced that Budapest will be the new location for a European hub, which will have two main components, technical engineering on the one hand side and purchasing on the other hand side. So my question would be to you, Lukas, what is your experience so far here in Hungary? How happy are you with the talent that you have found? And also, did the pandemic impact in any way your ramp-up plans currently? And what is the outlook for the future?
Thank you. Yes, you're absolutely right. Next month, on 4th of November exactly, we'll be celebrating the 3 years since we've announced arrival to Hungary. It's been a very good start for us. We've been growing quite steadily, and of course, then the 2020 and the pandemic came. But let's not forget that for automotive industry, we have had some challenging times even before. We're talking about, for example, the sales slowdown in China. We're talking about specifically affecting us Brexit. And very recently, the semiconductor shortages, which as well are, of course, the challenges we have to handle. However, saying that, we are now here 3 years. We are also starting collaboration with the local universities, looking for talents on the universities. We are looking for graduates. So I guess the positive statement at the end is we are here, we are growing, and yes.
Thank you very much, Lukas.
Thank you.
Now I will move back to the OEMs that already have manufacturing presence in the country. You've mentioned already semiconductors, which is one topic which comes up quite often. The other one, of course, was the pandemic. So my question to Audi Hungaria and Mr. Dintner would be, how did you cope with these challenges, the pandemic, shortages in the supply chain? And maybe on the positive side, can this represent an opportunity maybe for local suppliers to have better chances in entering the value chain of major players?
The semiconductor situation, the way we're seeing it currently, of course, we know that semiconductor suppliers are trying to turn on their capacities. And now we're forecasting 5 to 8%, and we know that the needs for semiconductor are about 20% right now. So it's difficult, but still, in the next period, it will be probably very difficult. But we have our company strategy and our company procurement team that are currently working in the various regions of the world to discuss with our suppliers and to maybe set up manufacturing sites there. Of course, this is a very long-term story, and this is something that will be running for the next years. The only thing we can currently do is to be very smart and intelligent in tackling this issue. For the moment, we are trying to manage the results in a way that if there's someone who is providing very good results, and if they can provide a good amount of chips, then, for example, we will prefer them. And this is a sort of competition among the suppliers. And we always want to be in the forefront of this competition. And this is something we have learned during the COVID crisis, to set up our companies in a way that they work in an efficient way. Even though we have to see some losses, we need to be quick in responding to the customers' needs. And to try to remain elegant in the way we manage this situation. I think it's also an important message that we have very important contracts. We could keep on building cars to eternity, and now we had the pandemic, we had the semiconductor situation, so we need to be prepared. But I think the future is positive, and we have to pay our employees, we have to keep our jobs safe, and we need to rely on digitalization. We have to keep saving wherever we can, but we have to keep on investing as well, and at the end of the day, just to make the best out of what we have.
Thank you very much. Of course, having a large order book is always the basis for the future growth, and let's hope that with the drive and creativity of the team of Audi Hungary, you are able to overcome these challenges going forward. Thank you very much for your comments. Moving on to Magyar Suzuki, where I remember that the Vitara has about a 40% of local supplier share when it comes to components. Is there still a further chance for Hungarian companies to enter the value chain, leveraging the instability of global supply chains? And what was your experience in dealing with issues of the pandemic and the semiconductor shortages?
Okay, so talking about semiconductor shortage, honestly speaking, for us nowadays, this is the hottest topic. This is the biggest challenge of the last months, and as we see in the next months as well, this will be the most important challenge for the management, how we can flexibly follow and reorganize continuously our production in order to run as continuously as possible. We estimate that we will have disruptions in production, and we have to manage very best possible way all these disruptions. Of course, we have to keep our workforce under this condition. We have to give to our workforce peace of mind. We have to make them to feel safe. Yes, of course, financially is no question. We are a very stable company. We will pay the wages, even we have to sometimes to stop production due to the semiconductors. Of course, there is a paradigm, because on the other side, market demand for our cars is very high. So honestly speaking, our sales guys are very frustrated. They would like to sell, customer is there waiting for the car, but unfortunately due to semiconductor issue, we cannot produce those cars. So we have to tackle day by day with this situation. And as we see until end of first quarter of next year, we will continuously face this situation. That is what we predict now, and we just can hope that in the second quarter, step by step, situation will improve. The other big challenge for us will be to secure enough skilled and highly educated workforce for our company. We have started to bring several services to service centrally from Hungarian plant the all Suzuki Europe. For example, spare parts and accessory, we have established the hub for Europe in Hungary. We are managing 7 warehouses located all over Europe from here, from Hungary. And IT services as well, step by step, we have brought to Hungary, and we are serving from Hungary all our European distribution. And that's giving us a big challenge, especially engineers and IT persons is very high demand for us. But for example, still, I could see just yesterday that IT case, we have several unfulfilled positions, and we are working hardly to get the manpower for this. So I think this will be the main challenges ahead of us in short run.
Thank you very much for this overview. Moving on to Christian and Mercedes-Benz Manufacturing Hungary. On the one hand side, I remember you have been very successful during the pandemic by transforming some of the processes internally to make sure that you can stop the spread of the virus within the factory. On the other hand side, on this other topic of semiconductors, my question would only be, do you see some light at the end of the tunnel already, or it's difficult to make any predictions for the near future?
Let me first start. Since the semiconductor crisis, I know the meaning or the understanding of the German word Friday. Friday in Germany is Freitag, and when you translate it, it's a free day. And I know now it's a free day of production. Yeah? So we are joking about that, but it's really a mess. As Alphonse mentioned, we could sell cars all over the world. The famous cars made in Kecskemét are demanded. There's high demand all over the world. We could have had a record year this year. And what we see is a crisis because of semiconductors. We don't know. I'm with Alphonse. It will take a while. Yeah? We heard statements from so-called experts in the second half of 21. It's over. Then we have heard in the last quarter of 21 it's over. It will take a while, and it will take also 22. I'm absolutely sure about that. And we have to adapt us to that crisis. We have to be flexible in the plant, and we are happy that we are flexible. We have a flexible work space here in Kecskemét. We have the conditions. Our people are so flexible. In Mercedes, we have the same situation like Alphonse mentioned. Every week, the board decides in which plant the limited amount of semiconductors will be.
Hova kerülne az a néhány félvezető, ami rendelkezésre áll, melyik gyárba. Tehát itt általában az S-klászok kapják, úgyhogy ez lehet, hogy nem az előnyünkre válik, de nagyon költséghatékonyan tudunk dolgozni, és a költséghatékonyság is nagy súlyt nyom alatban a döntéshozatal folyamán. A legfontosabb az, hogy a munkavállalókat jó kedvben tudjuk megőrizni, mert ha rossz kedvűek a munkavállalóink, akkor az nem tesz jót a termelésnél. Tehát a leállási időket igaziból az oktatásra kell kihasználnunk. Az EQB kapcsán képeztük a munkavállalókat, egyéb területeken képeztük őket, és reméljük, hogy ez működni fog. Említette ugye a magyar beszállítókat. Azt gondolom, hogy azt fogjuk látni, hogy az OEM-ek közvetlenebbül keresik majd föl a félvezető gyártókat, nem fognak Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3-as útvonalat bejárni. Elképzelhető az is, hogy több forrásból fogják majd beszerezni a félvezetőket. Nem tudom.
May I ask something to HIPA? Maybe I have a request for HIPA.
Lehet, hogy volna egy kérésem a HIPA felé. Van egy álmom, tudniillik. Az álmom, hogy felébredek, és kapok egy meghívást önöktől egy magyarországi félvezetőgyár megnyitójára az e-mail fiókomba. Úgy gondolom, hogy ez sok mindent meg tudna oldani, és azt gondolom, hogy ez a magyar beszállítóknak is több lehetőséget biztosítani, de ahogy említettem, nekünk már 50%-os a magyar beszállítói arányunk, de úgy gondolom, hogy a félvezető gyár magyarországi létesítése egy jó ötlet lenne, gondolkodjanak el ezen. Köszönöm, Krisztián, és köszönöm az ötletet, feladatot is. Anélkül, hogy bármilyen üzleti titkot bejelentenék, erre az ötletre már gondoltunk, bennünk is felötlött, és vannak erről beszélgetések, de nagyon nehéz ez a helyzet, ez a kérdés, hiszen ez az iparág nagyon bizonyos földrajzi területekre koncentrálódik a világon, úgyhogy nem annyira könnyű kialakítani ennek az ökoszisztémáját a semmiből itt Magyarországon, de igyekszünk ezt megvalósítani, és remélem, hogy egy napon lesz lehetőségem arra, hogy ilyen meghívót küldjek önnek. Olivia, akkor most önnek adnám át a szót. Tudom, hogy az Opel Szent Gotthard is elég sikeres volt a járvány kezelésében, sokakat érintett egy átmeneti leállás talán az első hullám alatt, de azt hiszem az adaptáció után sikerült folyamatos működést biztosítani. Tudna egy pár szóval többet mondani erről, az önök szempontját felvillantani? Köszönöm.
Ugye azt mondanám, hogy ami egy közös pont a pandémia és a jelenlegi helyzet között, az a fluktuáció, tehát az igényeknek a változása, és mivel ennek a csoportnak részeként a Stellantis gépjárműgyártónak a cége vagyunk, ugye állandóan meg kell terveznünk, aztán újra terveznünk a termelést, és ami fontos, mert már korábban is említettem, hogy sikerült megbirkózni ezzel a helyzettel, mert relatív nagy HR csapatunk van, és a szakszervezetekkel is jól együttműködünk, de hát jól ki tudjuk használni a különböző műszakokat, viszonylag rugalmas bejelentési időszakokat alkalmazni, és az egyéni szabadságoknak a kivételevel is ugye megtárgyaljuk a dolgozókkal. Ugye szeretném azt is kiemelni, hogy figyelembe véve, hogy viszonylag jó a magyar szabályozás, tehát a magyar munkaerő környezet szabályozása, a magyar munkavállalóknak a szakértelme és tapasztalata azt jelenti, hogy jó lehetőségünk volt arra is, hogy Nyugat-Európából termelést át tudjunk csoportosítani Magyarországra, és ezt kihasználtuk, ezt a lehetőséget. A Stellantis oldaláról ugye 4 olyan gyár van, ahol ugyanazt a motort gyártjuk, de az úgynevezett nyugat-európai rövid munkaátállást kihasználva, hogy illetve a munkaerő hiány Nyugat-Európában jellemző, de Magyarországon nem. Tehát így tudunk például a francia gyárból segítséget kapni, és lehetőségünk van a jelenlegi helyzet megoldására. Nem mondanám azt, hogy plusz fölös munkaerőnk van, de fölös idő van, amit más gyárak számára fel tudunk a Stellantis csoporton belül ajánlani. Tehát az azt jelenti, hogy a mi embereink elmentek Franciaországba, Szlovákiába, Németországba, Ausztriába, amikor szükséges volt. Tehát ez mindenképpen egy jó lehetőség. Az OEM kérdésre visszatérve, illetve részben azzal kapcsolatban, azt gondolom, hogy nyilvánvaló, hogy bizonyos OEM-ek, tehát gyártók felismerik, hogy kritikus alkatrészeket helyben kell gyártani, vagy legalábbis lokálisan közel az autógyártó helyzethez. Ugye szeretnék egy példát említeni az én saját vállalatcsoportomon belül. A Stellantis már eldöntötte, hogy 2 akkumulátorgyárat épít, egyet Franciaországban, egyet Németországban, és még pluszban néhány nappal ezelőtt volt egy bejelentés a Mercedes-Benz partneri kapcsolatával együtt, akik szintén az ACC csoport része, hogy ez lesz a jövő, azt gondolom, azonban további tevékenységekre van szükség, hogy ezt a drámai változást megvalósítsuk a globális ellátási láncban, és azt gondolom, hogy egyrészt nagyon türelmesnek kell lenni, másrészt pedig motiválni, illetve hajtani, előre vinni a helyzetet. Nagyon jó hallani azt, hogy versenyképes marad a Szentgotthárdi gyár a Stellantis csoporton belül, és hogy ilyen tervek vannak a jövőre. Tehát visszatérve a BMW-hez, Johann, megkérdezhetném-e, hogy mik a következő lépések a jövőben, és hogy van-e, anélkül, hogy üzleti titkokat árulna el, magáról, a gyárról, ennek az építéséről, mi az, amit elmondhat az elkövetkezendő időszakról, és azt is kérdezném, ha lehetséges, hogy kapcsolatba lépette bizonyos oktatási intézményekkel, hogy bővíteni tudják a dolgozóknak a körét. Igen, már zajlik építkezés, csövek elhelyezése, esővízelvezetés, elektromos áram és víz szolgáltatás, amit nem látnak a távolból, de zajlik buzgón a munka, az utak, a parkolók kiépítése, ami maga a tényleges építkezést illeti, az jövő év elején fog kezdődni, infrastruktúra, épületek, illetve az oktatói központ lesz az egyik első épület, ami elkezdődik 2022 elején. És aztán egy ilyen több fázisra osztott megoldással a technológiai épületeket is megépítjük, tehát nagyon intenzív időszak elé nézzünk, ugye jövő év elejétől, majd meglátjuk, hogy hogyan növekszik aztán az elkövetkező hónapokban és években a gyár. Ami a dolgozóknak a bővítése jelenti, ugye már 20 dolgozónk van a leányvállalatnál, HR pozícióban, illetve az építő csapatban is, és vannak új munkavállalók toborzása is, ugye most jelenleg ebben a fázisban, most ugye az építkezés, a HR és a pénzügy technikai munkaerőre, majd 2020 későbbi felében 2022, bocsánat, lesz erre szükség. Tehát ugye beruházások folynak, ugye már említettem az oktatási központot, illetve kapcsolatba léptünk az ESEG-vel, és 2 helyi iskolából, amely Debrecenben ugye a duális rendszerhez nagyon hasonló fajta képzést jelent. Ez azt jelenti, hogy 75 gyakornoki helyet teremtünk 2023 szeptemberétől, és ez az oktatás, ez tovább fog folytatódni a következő években is. Hogyha elmondhatom, hogy mindenféle erőfeszítés ellenére, ami az automatizálás és a digitalizás irányába történik, ez még mindig az úgynevezett emberüzlet, tehát minden egyes erőfeszítés, ami a képzett munkaerőt illeti, az én szempontomból nem csak az autóiparnál fontos, hanem a mindenféle gyártásnál, és ez az iskolával kezdődik. Tehát, hogy szakképzési rendszerben, technikai képzettséggel kapcsolatos, és természetesen ugye ez folytatódik a számítógépes villamosmérnök, illetve gépészmérnök képzéssel az egyetemeken, tehát ezek nagyon fontos képzettségek, amikre mindannyiunknak szükségünk van, az autóiparban, és nem csak ott. Tehát az a beruházás, az a befektetés, amit a kormány végez az oktatás szempontjából, az nagyon fontos, nagyon lényeges az iparág szempontjából, és azt gondolom, hogy ez az egyik legfontosabb tényező, hogy mindazon kihívásoknak megfeleljünk, amik előttünk vannak. Igen, tehát értjük, hogy a gyártást nem lehet home office-ból végezni, a jövőben sem, és akkor komolyabbra véve a szót, szeretném tájékoztatni önöket, hogy az infrastrukturális fejlesztések, azok mind rendben zajlanak, és reméljük, hogy ez mind nagyon sikeres és versenyképes lesz a BMW hálózatban. Köszönöm szépen az itt elmondott részleteket, és akkor most pedig a Jaguar Land Roverre térnénk rá. Ugye olyan vezetők előtt ül, akik magyarországi autóipari vezetők. Mit gondol, hogy regionális beszerzési vállalkozásra jellemzőek, tehát hogy általában mit gondol a magyar beszállítókról, és másrésztről pedig, hogy miért fogadta el a meghívásunkat az Innovation Bootcampre, meg tudná osztani néhány tapasztalatát velünk. Először is én azt gondolom, hogy nem lesz új, ha azt mondom, hogy a beszerzése a mérnöki folyamatnak fontos része, és ezért van az, hogy nagyon impresszív, amit hallottunk az előadásokból, hogy milyen nagy számú beszállító van, és szélesebb körben, ugye a közép-európai térben. Tehát Budapesten léve az egész régiónak pont a közepén egy nagyon jó hely, nagyon jó bázis a mi beszerző csapatunk számára. Ez néhány előnyt jelent számunkra. Egyrészt ugye közel vagyunk a beszállítókhoz, együtt tudunk velük működni, közel tudunk lenni, és könnyű és gyors az előrejutás. A következő kérdésre válaszként a bootcamp. Én azt gondolom, hogy mérnökként az innováció nagyon közel áll a szívemhez, és nagyon örülök, hogy az Innovation Bootcamp megtörténik, és ez egy nagy megtiszteltetés számunkra, hogy ezekkel a fiatal startup cégekkel dolgozhatunk, és tegnap 3 kollégám, akik ugye technikai területen, műszaki területen szakértők, itt voltak Budapesten, és nagyon jó benyomást tett rám az eredmény, nagyon örültem annak a lelkületnek, annak a hozzáállásnak, és az ott elhangzott ötleteknek. Ezek az innovációs bootcampek más szempontból is fontosak. Természetesen ezek a cégeknek lehet, hogy tökéletes ötleteik vannak, ugye dobozon kívül gondolkodnak, de a megvalósítás néha nehéz lehet. Úgyhogy ezért fontos, hogy nagyon szoros legyen a kapcsolat az OEM, illetve az iparban szereplő szakértők között. Köszönöm szépen, mindenképpen folytatjuk az együttműködést önökkel, és keressük a lehetőségeket a beszállítókkal, a Jaguar Land Rovernél. Mielőtt befejezzük ezt a beszélgetést, már csak egy utolsó rövid kérdésem van önökhöz. Ezen alkalommal Oliviával kezdem, hogy mi lenne a fő cél vagy fókuszterület az elkövetkező 12 hónap során, és ugyanezt a kérdést fogom feltenni természetesen az uraknak is. Köszönöm. Igazából semmi új, hiszen folytatnunk kell ezt a fajta alkalmazkodást, azt az agilitást, amit az elmúlt 12 hónapban is folytattunk, mert biztos vagyok benne, hogy hasonló problémákkal fogunk küzdeni, mint jelenleg. Ez azt jelenti, hogy a termelést az igényekhez kell igazítanunk, és gyakorlatilag ez azt jelenti, hogy ezt olyan módon kell tenni, hogy a meglévő előnyeinket, a versenyelőnyünket megtartsuk, illetve a dolgozóink motivációját is. A második kérdés különösen számunkra azt jelenti, ahogy korábban is említettem, van egy új projektünk, egy új termékünk, tehát gyakorlatilag egy nagyon intenzív integrációs munka már elkezdődött, de ez sokkal gyakorlatiasabb lesz decembertől. Ez azt jelenti, hogy a legfontosabb dolog számomra és a csapatom számára az az, hogy egy sikeres és sima bevezetésre kerüljön sor. És a harmadik, azért általánosságban is igaz, talán nem csak rám, hanem mindenki másra, vannak olyan kapcsolódások, a nem termelő időszakok, ami lehet csak néhány nap, jó alkalom arra, hogy egy kisebb befektetést tegyünk az emberekbe, tehát oktatásra, képzésre gondolom, illetve a termelékenységre, mert kis projektek, kis dolgok, amit megtehetünk a termelő vonalon, a termelő soron, én azt gondolom, hogy ez nagyon fontos, és természetesen mindenki szeretne innovatív lenni, és követni a munkának az irányát, és ez egy jó alkalom arra, hogy az adatokat digitalizáljuk, folytassunk, illetve a mesterséges intelligencia projekteket bevezessünk. Én azt gondolom, hogy ez a 3 fő prioritás számomra, illetve a cégem számára, a Szentgotthárdi gyár számára az elkövetkező hónapokban. Köszönöm szépen, és sok sikert kívánok. Krisztián, Kecskemét szempontjából mi a stratégiai fókusz az elkövetkező 12 hónapban? Hát nagyon egyszerű, ugye az EQB-nek a sikeres bevezetése, és az új bélyegzési a prés üzemnek a megvalósítása. Ugye a termelés 10. évét ünnepeljük most Kecskeméten. Már 10 éve lesz jövőre, hogy itt működünk, és én azt remélem, hogy a korona lehetővé teszi számunkra, hogy egy eseményt szervezzünk, tehát, hogy amit megérdemelnek azok a fantasztikus kecskemétiek, úgyhogy jövőre ezt tervezzük. Köszönjük szépen, és drukkolunk, hogy ez sikerüljön. Mi a helyzet a magyar Suzuki-val, Robert? Mi a stratégiai fókusz jövőre? A stratégiai fókusz, hát természetesen operatív szinten a félvezetők problémáját, illetve a termelésnek a kiigazítását a hiány tekintetében, és hogy ezt javítsuk, egy kicsit változtatni kell azon a kapcsolati stíluson. Általában ugye az történik, hogy a beszerző kiadja a megrendelést, bejön a megrendelés, stb. De hát a jelenlegi hozzáállás, azt meg kell változtatnunk, sokkal közelebbi kapcsolatot kell kialakítani a beszállítóinkkal, és napi szinten ellenőriznünk kell, hogy hogyan tudjuk a legjobb szállítást elérni. Tehát ezt gondolom, hogy ez a fajta közeli kapcsolat, együttműködés nagyon fontos. Természetesen azt is mondtuk, hogy a TCO és az elektromos autóknak az ára ki fognak egyenlítődni majd a belső égési motorral rendelkező autókkal, de ez nem a drasztikus elektromos autó árcsökkenésnek, hanem a belső égési motorok árának a növekedésével függ össze. Tehát az ügyfeleink, a vevőinknek a megfizethetőségi helyzetétől is függ, tehát a hatékonyságunkat nagyon kell növelni ahhoz, hogy a költségnövekedést minimalizálni tudjuk. És ezek az úgynevezett zavarok, ezek a megszakítások jó lehetőséget adnak, hogy ezeket kiértékeljük. Igen, köszönöm szépen, és remélem, és kívánom, hogy pozitív legyen minden ilyen vállalkozás. És a Land Rover esetében is azt kérdezném, hogy növekedni fog a tevékenység Magyarországon, és érdekes lenne hallani önöktől, hogy mi a fő cél, mi a fő fókusz az elkövetkezendő 12 hónapban. Köszönöm szépen. Igen, a következő 12 hónap nagy kihívásokat fog jelenteni. Izgalmas lesz, de ugyanakkor nagy kihívásokkal teli. És ez azt jelenti, hogy mindannyian már többször említettük, ugye az a félvezetőknek a krízise, mindannyian küzdünk ezzel. Vállalati szinten folytatni fogjuk a stratégiánkat, de mindannyian kíváncsian várjuk, hogy a pandémia utáni világ hogyan fog kinézni. Ugye a piacon látjuk alternatív helyszíneknek a megjelenését, ugyanakkor azt gondoljuk, hogy a csoda akkor történik meg, amikor az emberek összejönnek és kicserélik az elképzeléseiket, tapasztalataikat. Tehát beszélni fogunk arról, hogy hogyan haladunk előre. Én azt gondolom, hogy azok a cégek, amelyek megtalálják a megfelelő egyensúlyt, azok lesznek sikeresek a jövőben. Köszönöm szépen. Johann, ön számára, ugye annak alapján, amit már elmondott, elég egyértelmű, hogy mi is a fókusz. Ennek ellenére megkérem, hogy mondjon egy-két meglátást, osszon meg velünk. Igen, természetesen a nagyon szoros menetrendet, ütemtervet tartani, az az egyik ilyen kihívás. különösen amikor ugye az építőipari cégek, illetve az ár problémák, árhelyzet az építőiparban elég nagy kihívást jelent, és remélhetőleg nem lesz semmiféle megszakítás ebben a tevékenységben a koronavírus miatt az elkövetkező évben. Mindettől függetlenül, ami nyilvánvalóan az egyik legfontosabb feladat, a másik, talán még fontosabb téma, az pedig az új gyárban a munkaerőnek a bővítése, tehát a müncheni gyárunkban is, a BMW-nél, illetve a debreceni gyárban is, hogy legyen több ember, az egyik legnagyobb prioritás, tehát az új gyárnak a megépítése és működtetése. Köszönöm szépen, és ezt nagy figyelemmel követjük majd, és várjuk. És végül, de nem utolsó sorban, az Audi Hungáriának a vezetője hogyan látja az elkövetkező 12 hónapot, hogy hol lesz a stratégiai fókusz.
Úgy gondolom, hogy nagyon fontos, hogy a minőséget, a darabszámot, illetve a hatékonyságot megtartsuk, illetve most Audi Hungáriaként bizonyítani tudjuk, hogy a kompetenciáink jelen vannak hajtásrendszerek és autók gyártásában. Ezeknek a szinergiáját kell megtalálni, illetve az egész nálunk és az egész VW koncernben. Tehát ki kell bővítenünk a kompetencia mezőinket, és meg is kell ezeket mutatnunk, és így kicsit fényeznünk az Audi Hungáriának a hírnevét, illetve a tehetségekre is szükség van természetesen, mint ahogy ma már hallottuk ennek a fontosságát. De azt talán még elmondanám, hogy most nálunk a koncertben, Komfortnál,
So, und da gilt es natürlich jetzt zu schauen, bei den Bällen, die abgeschlagen werden, wann fliegen die auf unser Green?
Tehát le kellett csapnunk a naplabdákat, és nagyon fontos számunkra, hogy megfelelően befolyásoljuk ezeket az embereket, akik lecsapják ezeket a labdákat nagy vonalakban is, illetve a magyar gazdaság szempontjából és Audi Hungária szempontjából is wichtig ist. Tehát most egy korszakhatáron állunk. Fontos, hogy a labdák a jó irányba pattanjanak le, és ne menjenek a hálóba.
Úgy gondolom, hogy az Audi Hungária nemzetgazdaságban betöltött szerepét tekintve nagyon fontos az, hogy sikeresek legyenek, számukra is nagyon fontos, és természetesen ezért is számíthatnak a teljes támogatásunkra. Hölgyeim és uraim, ezzel a kérdéssel zártuk le a panelbeszélgetést itt a kollégákkal a színpadon, de mielőtt elengedném önöket, szeretném emlékeztetni önöket, azokat, akik itt vannak velünk személyesen arra, hogy most lesz egy félórás szünetünk, utána pedig akkor folytatjuk a programot az innovációs bootcamp-el, az Innovation Bootcampet a Design Terminállal közösen szervezzük meg. Audi, Hungária, Jaguar, Land Rover, ThyssenKrupp szintén partnerek voltak ebben. Azok számára, akik online követik az eseményt, szeretném jelezni, hogy egy másik linken kell majd bekapcsolódni az Innovation Bootcampbe. Kérem önöket, hogy tartsanak velünk. Még egyszer szeretnék köszönetet mondani kollégáimnak, illetve a cégvezetőknek, hogy részt vettek ebben a panelbeszélgetésben. Nagy megtiszteltetés volt számomra ez a beszélgetés, és úgy gondolom, hogy az ügyvezetők megérdemelnek egy tapsot.
Thank you very much.
Köszönöm szépen, és akkor a szünet után találkozunk.